You're too late. First class is closed to people like you. The words crashed across gate C18 with enough force to silence every nearby conversation. Rolling suitcases slowed. Coffee cups froze halfway to waiting lips. Even the steady chorus of boarding announcements seemed to fade beneath the sharp confidence in the gate agent's voice. At exactly 8:14 on a warm Thursday morning inside Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, 12 minutes became the excuse that would expose something far uglier than a missed boarding window. Monica Hayes stopped just short of the boarding lane, her breathing steady despite the sprint through 2 terminals after a delayed connecting flight from Charlotte. At 45 years old, she had learned long ago that panic only rewarded people who expected to see it. She wore dark jeans, clean white sneakers, a fitted navy sweater, and a simple black carry-on slung over one shoulder. There were no luxury logos, no jewelry announcing success, no entourage clearing a path through the crowd. She looked like any other traveler trying to catch a flight. That was exactly why no one looked twice, except the woman standing behind the boarding scanner. Karen Whitmore, the senior gate agent, glanced from Monica's face to her clothes, then to the first-class boarding pass held neatly between 2 fingers. Her expression hardened before she even reached for the scanner. "Boarding ended 12 minutes ago," she said flatly. "That seat is no longer available." Monica looked up at the departure board, then back at Karen. "The inbound flight from Charlotte arrived late. Your airline rebooked me automatically. I came here as fast as I could." Karen didn't acknowledge the explanation. Instead, she folded her arms as if the conversation had already been decided. "You should have planned better." Behind Monica, a middle-aged white businessman adjusted his expensive watch and let out a quiet laugh. That's what happens when people think buying a fancy ticket changes the rules. A few passengers smiled awkwardly. Others stared at their phones, pretending not to hear. Monica remained still. She had heard versions of that sentence before. Different airport, different city, different decade. Always the same assumption hiding behind different words. A young gate assistant named Emily Brooks looked toward the reservation screen, then back at Monica's boarding pass. Something about the name seemed familiar, but before she could speak, Karen reached across the counter and placed Monica's ticket face down without scanning it. "Stand over there," she ordered, pointing toward a row of empty seats near the window. "We'll see if there's anything left after everyone else boards." Monica didn't move immediately. She simply studied the jet bridge where passengers continued walking onto the aircraft. A family arrived several minutes after she had. Their boarding passes were scanned without hesitation. A standby traveler was welcomed aboard with a cheerful smile. No one mentioned 12 minutes. No one mentioned policy. The excuse had already served its purpose. The air around gate C18 grew heavier with every passing second, and although Monica's voice never rose, everyone close enough to watch could feel that this moment had quietly become about far more than a seat in first class. Monica quietly picked up her carry-on and walked to the row of empty seats Karen had pointed toward, not because she accepted the decision, but because experience had taught her that people often revealed far more when they believed they had already won. She placed her bag beside her, crossed one leg over the other, and watched the boarding lane with calm, observant eyes. Every few seconds another passenger stepped forward, scanned a boarding pass, and disappeared down the jet bridge. Emily Brooks remained at the secondary computer, her fingers moving across the keyboard as if she were searching for something she could not quite explain. She glanced toward Monica more than once before Karen noticed. "Do not waste time," Karen said without lowering her voice. "She missed boarding. That is all you need to know." Emily hesitated. "Her reservation still shows confirmed first class." Karen answered almost immediately. "It will not in another minute." Standing beside Karen was the gate supervisor, Daniel Cooper, a man in his early 50s whose polished appearance projected confidence before he spoke a single word. He walked toward Monica with measured steps, carrying a tablet in one hand. "Miss Hayes," he began, forcing a polite smile that never reached his eyes, "our records indicate you arrived after final boarding. Unfortunately, your seat has already been reassigned." Monica looked directly at him. "I watched 2 passengers board after I arrived." Daniel barely paused. "Operational decisions are made at the discretion of the airline. So policy changes depending on the passenger?" she asked quietly. Daniel ignored the question. "We can place you in economy on the next available flight later this afternoon." Monica glanced toward the aircraft where the boarding door remained open. Ground crew were still loading luggage into the cargo hold. Fueling operations had not yet finished. The airplane had not pushed back. "This flight has not departed," she said evenly. "My assigned seat is empty." Daniel folded his hands in front of him. "Not anymore." Just then, a well-dressed white couple approached the boarding lane carrying matching leather travel bags. The man laughed with Karen as though they were old friends. Without checking the boarding time or asking any questions, Karen scanned their passes and welcomed them aboard with a cheerful smile. Monica watched silently as the couple disappeared down the jet bridge. Emily looked at the screen again, confusion spreading across her face. The first-class seat number that had belonged to Monica only moments earlier now displayed a completely different passenger name. Emily leaned toward Daniel and spoke softly enough that only he could hear, but Monica caught a few words. "Standby upgrade. Approved 2 minutes ago." Daniel gave Emily a sharp look that ended the conversation instantly. Across the waiting area, a retired Air Force veteran named Thomas Walker lowered the newspaper he had been reading since boarding began. "Excuse me," he called out calmly. "I have been sitting here the whole time. That lady was here before those two people." Several nearby passengers turned toward him. Karen forced a smile that looked more irritated than professional. "Sir, this does not concern you." Thomas did not argue, but neither did he look away. A young travel blogger sitting near the charging stations quietly lifted her phone, pretending to check messages while her camera captured everything unfolding at the gate. Emily's eyes returned to Monica's reservation one final time, and this time her expression changed completely. She leaned closer to the monitor, whispered, "That cannot be right," then slowly looked up at Monica as if she had just recognized a name she had seen somewhere far beyond an airline reservation system. Emily could not take her eyes off the reservation screen. She enlarged the passenger profile once, then again, convinced she had clicked the wrong record. The name remained exactly the same. Monica Hayes. Executive priority status. Lifetime chairman circle. Internal notes restricted. Emily swallowed hard before quietly looking toward Daniel Cooper once more. "Supervisor," she whispered, "I think we should verify this before releasing the seat permanently." Daniel barely glanced at the monitor. "There is nothing to verify." Emily lowered her voice even further. "Her account has an executive designation I have never seen before." Daniel's expression hardened. "Emily, this is not your decision." Karen stepped beside them, folded her arms, and looked directly at Monica as if the discussion itself had become an inconvenience. "Some people believe special labels solve everything," she said loudly enough for several waiting passengers to hear. "Rules still apply." Monica remained seated, her hands resting calmly on the handle of her carry-on. She neither defended herself nor interrupted. She simply watched every decision unfold, almost as though she were allowing each person to reveal exactly who they were. The silence unsettled Karen more than any argument could have. "Why are you still sitting here?" Karen asked. "Your flight is no longer available." Monica answered without changing her tone. "The aircraft door is still open." Karen forced a smile. "That does not mean you are getting on it." A few feet away, the travel blogger adjusted her phone to capture a clearer angle while pretending to scroll through social media. Thomas Walker quietly stood from his seat and walked closer to the boarding lane. "Young lady," he said to Karen, "I spent 26 years serving this country. I know the difference between policy and personal judgment. What I have watched for the last 10 minutes is not policy." Karen's smile disappeared instantly. "Sir, I need you to return to the waiting area." Thomas folded his newspaper under one arm, but did not move. "I will in a minute." Other passengers had started paying attention now. A mother traveling with 2 children whispered something to her husband. A college student removed one earbud. An elderly couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. The atmosphere no longer felt like a routine boarding process. It felt like everyone had become unwilling jurors inside an unexpected public trial. Daniel decided to end it. "Miss Hayes," he announced, "your first-class seat has officially been reassigned. If you refuse our alternate accommodation, we will consider your travel complete for today." Monica looked at him for several quiet seconds before asking a single question. "Did you make that decision before or after you reassigned my seat?" Daniel hesitated for the first time. Only a heartbeat. But Emily noticed. So did Thomas. Karen answered before Daniel could speak. That is not information we are required to provide. Monica gave a slow nod, as though another invisible piece of a puzzle had fallen into place. Thank you, she replied softly. That answers more than you realize. Emily looked back at the monitor again, curiosity overpowering hesitation. She clicked deeper into the reservation history. A timeline appeared showing every modification made within the last 15 minutes. Her eyes widened. Monica's confirmed seat had not been released automatically because of a late arrival. It had been manually reassigned less than 3 minutes after Monica reached the gate. Emily's pulse quickened. She looked toward Daniel in disbelief, but before she could say a word, Karen reached across the counter, closed the reservation window herself, and quietly instructed, "Log out of that screen." Emily froze. Daniel noticed the expression on her face and understood something had changed. Then Karen picked up the airport courtesy phone, dialed a short internal extension, and calmly said, "Could we have airport customer assistance report to gate C18 immediately? We have a passenger refusing to accept our boarding decision." Monica slowly reached into her bag, removed her phone, unlocked it without urgency, and after reading one brief notification, allowed the faintest smile to cross her face for the first time that morning. Monica read the notification only once before locking her phone again and placing it gently on top of her carry-on. There was no dramatic reaction, no triumphant smile, no rush to make a call. Her composure alone seemed to unsettle the people standing across the counter. Karen had expected frustration. Daniel had expected negotiation. Instead, they were facing someone who behaved as though time itself had quietly shifted in her favor. Emily could not ignore what she had seen on the reservation history. Every instinct told her something was deeply wrong. She stepped away from the counter under the excuse of organizing boarding paperwork, but instead opened the airline's internal employee directory on a separate terminal. She entered one name, Monica Hayes. Before she could finish typing the last letter, the system suggested an executive profile marked with restricted corporate access. Emily froze. She could not open the record, but the title beneath the name was enough to send a chill through her. The page immediately locked behind a security notice that ordinary gate employees were not authorized to view executive information. Emily quickly closed the screen before anyone noticed, yet her heartbeat had already doubled. Across the gate area, Thomas Walker quietly approached Monica. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I hope you do not mind me saying this, but you have handled this with more patience than most people could." Monica looked up and offered a small smile. "Anger rarely changes minds," she replied. "Sometimes people need the opportunity to reveal themselves first." Thomas nodded slowly. "Looks like they already have." Nearby, the young travel blogger lowered her phone for the first time since recording began. "My name is Olivia Bennett." She introduced herself softly. "I usually post travel reviews, not things like this. But people are already asking what happened." Monica answered with the same calm voice. "Tell them exactly what you saw. Nothing more, nothing less." Olivia nodded. "That is all I planned to do." At the far end of the waiting area, the mother traveling with 2 young daughters quietly spoke to them. "Remember this," she whispered. "Never decide what someone deserves by looking at their clothes." One little girl looked toward Monica and asked, "Why are they being mean to her?" Her mother struggled to answer before finally saying, "Sometimes grown-ups forget what respect looks like." Emily walked back toward Daniel, unable to remain silent any longer. "Supervisor, I really think corporate passenger services should review this before we close the flight." Daniel barely looked at her. "This conversation is over." Emily lowered her voice. "Her profile is restricted." Daniel finally turned. "How do you know that?" Emily hesitated just long enough to answer honestly. "Because I accidentally opened something I should not have seen." Karen stepped between them immediately. "Enough. Finish your duties." Emily looked from Karen to Monica, then back to the computer screen. For the first time since she joined the airline, she wondered whether following instructions and doing the right thing had become 2 completely different choices. At that exact moment, 2 airport customer assistance representatives arrived at gate C18 wearing navy jackets with airline logos stitched above their badges. Karen greeted them with a confident smile before speaking first. "This passenger missed boarding and refuses our alternative accommodations." One representative turned politely toward Monica. "Ma'am, we would like to hear your side as well." Before Monica could answer, Karen interrupted again. "There is no other side. Monica remained seated for one quiet moment before standing gracefully. She picked up her carry-on, looked directly at the customer assistance representatives, and said, "I appreciate you asking. I believe you should hear the complete timeline before making any decisions." Just then, every computer monitor behind the gate counter suddenly refreshed at the same time, displaying a bright blue system notification that none of the employees had ever seen before. Every monitor behind the counter flashed the same blue notification before automatically locking the reservation system. Karen frowned and pressed several keys, but nothing responded. Daniel tried his terminal with the same result. The gate, so orderly only moments earlier, suddenly felt uncertain. One of the customer assistance representatives leaned toward the screen and quietly read the message. "Temporary administrative review in progress." Karen forced a nervous laugh. Probably another system update. Emily knew better. She had worked enough early morning shifts to recognize routine maintenance, and this was not one of them. Administrative reviews did not appear without warning, especially not in the middle of active boarding. Monica stood quietly beside her carry-on, showing no surprise at all. It was the same composed expression she had carried since arriving at the gate, as though she had expected every minute to unfold exactly this way. One representative introduced himself as Michael Grant and turned politely toward Monica. "Ma'am, if you would like to explain what happened from the beginning, I am here to listen." Monica nodded once. "I arrived after my connecting flight landed late because of weather. I presented a valid boarding pass for a confirmed first-class seat. Before anyone verified my reservation, I was told my seat was unavailable. Minutes later, I watched another passenger board with the same seat assignment after my reservation had been manually changed." Michael listened carefully without interrupting. Karen immediately stepped in. "She is leaving out the important part. She arrived after final boarding." Monica looked directly at her. "Then why was boarding still in progress?" No one answered. Instead, silence drifted through gate C18 like a slow-moving cloud. Even nearby passengers seemed unwilling to break it. Thomas Walker quietly spoke up again. "She has asked that question 3 times. Nobody has answered it once." Olivia Bennett lowered her phone for a moment and said, "I have the entire timeline recorded from before those other passengers boarded." Karen's confidence began to crack around the edges. "Recording employees without permission is inappropriate." Olivia answered calmly. "Recording events in a public boarding area is not against airport policy." The words landed harder than Karen expected. Emily stared at Monica for another long moment, and suddenly an old memory surfaced. 6 months earlier, every employee in the company had watched a leadership webcast introducing the airline's largest strategic investment partnership. The presentation had lasted less than 20 minutes, but one face had remained in Emily's memory because the speaker talked about treating every traveler with dignity before discussing profits or growth. Monica Hayes. The same calm eyes, the same measured voice. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. She looked again at Monica, then back toward Daniel. "Supervisor," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I know who she is." Daniel frowned impatiently. "Then tell me." Emily hesitated, afraid of being wrong, yet even more afraid she was right. Before she could answer, Monica's thoughts drifted somewhere far away. 21 years earlier, she had stood alone at another airport wearing a modest business suit, carrying nothing but a briefcase and a dream. A gate employee had looked at her ticket, then at her face, and quietly asked whether she was certain she belonged in the premium cabin. She remembered the passengers who avoided eye contact. She remembered pretending the words did not hurt. More than anything, she remembered promising herself that if success ever found her, she would build companies where respect was never reserved for appearances. That promise had shaped every business decision she made. Now, standing at gate C18 after 2 decades of building exactly that future, she found herself facing the same assumptions wearing different uniforms. Monica slowly returned to the present and unlocked her phone once more. A single message had appeared across the screen. It contained only 4 words. Protocol 7 is active. She looked up calmly as the public address speakers above the gate suddenly chimed, followed by an announcement that caused every airline employee in the boarding area to stop where they stood. The public address speakers chimed once, then a calm corporate voice echoed across gate C18. "Attention airport operations personnel. Please maintain current boarding status for flight 482. Executive Operations Review is now in progress. Further instructions will follow. The announcement lasted only a few seconds, yet it transformed the atmosphere more completely than any raised voice could have. Karen stared upward in confusion before looking back at her frozen computer terminal. "What is an executive operations review?" she muttered. Daniel tried calling the operations desk, but every call redirected to a recorded message asking him to remain at his assigned location until contacted by corporate operations. Emily stood perfectly still. She had never heard of this procedure outside internal training materials. Michael Grant, the customer assistance representative, glanced toward Monica with growing curiosity. "Ma'am," he asked respectfully, "did you request this review?" Monica answered with complete honesty. "No, I simply reported what happened." She left the rest unsaid. Across the waiting area, passengers who had been preparing to board now watched every movement at the gate. Nobody seemed interested in their phones anymore. Thomas Walker folded his newspaper completely and slipped it into his backpack. "Looks like somebody important finally noticed," he said quietly. Olivia Bennett refreshed her recording screen and noticed comments appearing faster than she could read them. Several viewers recognized the airline logo behind Monica and urged her to keep recording. Emily finally gathered enough courage to speak. "Supervisor," she said carefully, "I think we should stop making assumptions and start verifying facts." Daniel looked at her with visible frustration. "You are a trainee compared to everyone standing here. Let management handle management." Emily lowered her eyes for a moment, then replied softly, "That is exactly what worries me." Monica observed the exchange without interruption. She had spent decades leading organizations, and she recognized the moment when good employees were forced to choose between loyalty to individuals and loyalty to principles. Those moments often revealed the true culture of a company more clearly than any annual report ever could. Her phone vibrated once. She answered immediately. "Good morning, Monica," came the familiar voice of her executive assistant, Rachel Simmons. "Protocol 7 has been activated. Corporate ethics, passenger experience, legal affairs, and executive operations are reviewing live system records. We have preserved every reservation change, every terminal log, and every access record connected to your booking." Monica's expression never changed. "Thank you, Rachel. Do you require anyone to come to the gate?" Rachel asked. Monica looked toward Karen, Daniel, Emily, Thomas, Olivia, and the dozens of passengers who had quietly become witnesses. "Not yet," she replied. "Let everyone finish making their decisions first." Rachel understood immediately. Understood. The review continues. Monica ended the call and slipped her phone back into her bag. Karen crossed her arms again, attempting to recover the confidence that had slowly slipped away. "A phone call does not change airline policy," she declared. Monica met her eyes calmly. "No," she answered. "But truth usually changes something much bigger than policy." Before Karen could respond, every terminal behind the counter unlocked simultaneously. A new message replaced the reservation screens in bold white letters against a dark blue background. Executive Review Team arriving on site. Preserve current personnel. Do not alter records. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes. Emily inhaled sharply. Daniel's face lost its color. Karen read the message twice, hoping she had misunderstood it. Then, through the large terminal windows overlooking the concourse, a group of sharply dressed corporate executives turned the corner and began walking directly toward Gate C18. The group of executives moved through the concourse with quiet purpose, their pace steady enough to attract attention without demanding it. Airline. Employees instinctively stepped aside as they approached Gate C18. At the front walked Executive Vice President of Operations Richard Ellison, followed by Corporate Ethics Director Angela Brooks, Senior Legal Counsel David Chun, and 2 members of the Executive Review Team carrying secured tablets instead of briefcases. Daniel recognized Richard immediately from annual leadership conferences. His shoulders stiffened. Karen forced a welcoming smile that disappeared the instant Richard walked past her without a greeting. Instead, he stopped directly in front of Monica. For one silent moment, the entire gate seemed to stop breathing. Then Richard offered a respectful nod. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes. I am sorry you had to experience this." Every conversation in the waiting area vanished. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, realizing her suspicion had been correct all along. Thomas Walker slowly removed his cap. Olivia's phone remained perfectly still in her hands, capturing every second. Karen looked from Richard to Monica and back again, waiting for someone to explain what she was seeing. Richard continued. We reviewed the reservation history, the terminal access records, and the gate activity while walking here. The preliminary findings are already complete. Daniel attempted to speak. Sir, this passenger arrived after final boarding. Richard calmly interrupted him. The aircraft door remained open. Boarding continued after Ms. Hayes reached the gate. Her reservation was manually reassigned while she was standing here. No one answered. There was nothing left to dispute. Angela Brooks stepped toward Emily. Were you the employee who questioned the reservation history? Emily nodded carefully. Yes, ma'am. Angela offered a small smile. Thank you for following the facts. Karen finally found her voice. There has to be some misunderstanding. David Chun looked directly at her. There is no misunderstanding. There is a complete digital record. Monica remained silent throughout the exchange. She neither celebrated nor corrected anyone. Richard turned toward her once more. Would you like to address the team before we proceed? Monica looked around the gate at every face that had watched the morning unfold. I will, she replied softly. She stepped forward just enough for Karen, Daniel, Emily, the customer assistance representatives, and the surrounding passengers to hear every word. This morning was never about arriving 12 minutes late. It was about the assumptions made during those 12 minutes. Before anyone verified my reservation, I was judged. Before anyone checked the facts, my seat was reassigned. Before anyone treated me like a passenger, I was treated like a problem. She paused only long enough for the silence to settle over the gate. You did not deny boarding because you knew who I was. You denied dignity because you believed I was someone who did not belong. Karen's face turned pale. Daniel lowered his eyes to the floor. Monica continued with the same calm voice. For the record, I am Monica Hayes, founder and chief executive officer of Hayes Global Holdings. 3 years ago, my company became one of this airline's largest long-term strategic investors because we believed this brand could become an industry leader in customer experience. Today I came here as an ordinary traveler. I wanted to be treated like one. A wave of disbelief spread through the waiting area. Olivia slowly whispered, She really is the one from the leadership broadcast. Thomas nodded quietly. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes, not from fear, but from relief that the truth had finally reached the surface. Richard looked toward the executive review team and gave a single, unmistakable instruction. Begin Phase 2. Every executive opened their secured tablets at exactly the same moment, and within seconds the access badges hanging from Karen's and Daniel's uniforms emitted a sharp electronic tone that neither of them had ever heard before. The sharp electronic tone echoed through gate C18 with startling clarity. Karen instinctively reached for the access badge hanging from her jacket, but the small green light that had always confirmed her credentials had turned solid red. Daniel checked his own badge and found the same result. Richard Ellison looked at neither of them with anger nor satisfaction. His expression remained calm, almost solemn. Your operational access has been temporarily suspended pending the outcome of this review, he said evenly. Please remain available for interviews with the executive review team. Karen stared in disbelief. You are suspending us because one passenger complained? Angela Brooks answered before anyone else could speak. No. We are responding to verified system records, employee testimony, reservation history, terminal activity logs, and witness accounts. The complaint simply brought those facts to our attention. David Chin opened his tablet and read from the investigation summary. Confirmed first-class reservation. Manual seat reassignment while the passenger remained eligible for boarding. Unequal application of boarding procedures. Failure to verify customer status before denying travel. Multiple opportunities to correct the decision were declined. Each sentence landed heavier than the one before it. Emily quietly lowered her eyes. Thomas Walker folded his arms with quiet satisfaction, not because anyone had been embarrassed, but because the truth had finally spoken louder than assumptions. Olivia Bennett continued recording, but even she noticed the mood had changed. This was no longer a dramatic confrontation. It had become an accountability meeting unfolding in public. Richard turned toward Emily once more. Ms. Brooks, effective immediately, thank you for documenting your concerns instead of ignoring them. Your cooperation will be included in our review. Emily blinked in surprise. I only followed what I believed was right. Richard nodded. That is exactly why it matters. Michael Grant from Customer Assistance stepped forward carrying a freshly printed boarding pass. Ms. Hayes, your original first-class seat has been fully restored. The standby reassignment has been reversed, and the flight crew has been instructed to prepare for your arrival. Monica accepted the boarding pass with the same quiet grace she had shown all morning. Thank you, she replied. She did not glance at Karen or Daniel. She did not ask for an apology. She simply thanked the employee who had treated her with respect. Karen finally found the courage to speak. Ms. Hayes, The words stopped before they could become a sentence. Monica looked at her with steady eyes. Today was never about making someone lose a position, she said calmly. It was about making sure no traveler loses their dignity because of someone else's assumptions. Silence settled over the gate again. Even the nearby passengers seemed to absorb every word. Angela Brooks addressed the gathering employees. This review will not end here. We will examine whether today's decisions reflect isolated judgment or a broader pattern. Every customer deserves the same respect before anyone knows their title, their income, or their influence. Several airline employees standing nearby lowered their heads, quietly reflecting on the statement. Thomas Walker smiled faintly. That should be written on every boarding gate in America, he said. Monica picked up her carry-on and began walking toward the jet bridge. Halfway there she paused and turned back only once. The most valuable thing you can offer a passenger is not an upgrade, she said softly. It is the benefit of fairness before the benefit of doubt. Richard watched her continue toward the aircraft before turning to the executive review team. Proceed with the remaining personnel interviews, secure every system log from this morning, and notify the board that Phase 2 has concluded. At that exact moment, Richard's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time that morning, even his composed expression shifted. He looked toward Monica, who had just reached the aircraft door, and quietly said, "The chairman has requested an immediate call. He wants to address everyone involved personally before this flight departs." Richard answered the call immediately and activated the speaker so everyone standing at gate C-18 could hear the voice on the other end. "This is Chairman William Carter," the calm voice began. "Before Flight 482 departs, there is something every employee present deserves to hear." The waiting area fell completely silent. Even the boarding crew inside the aircraft paused to listen. Our company was built on the belief that every passenger deserves dignity before they deserve recognition. Today that promise was tested, and today we learned that procedures alone do not create trust. People do. Richard lowered his head respectfully as the chairman continued. Ms. Monica Hayes has invested in this airline because she believed we could become an example for the industry. She never asked to be treated differently. She expected to be treated fairly. There is a difference, and every employee should understand it. Monica stood quietly at the aircraft door with her boarding pass in one hand and her carry-on in the other. She never interrupted. She never corrected anyone. She simply listened. Chairman Carter continued, "The executive review team will complete a full investigation. Any decisions regarding personnel will follow established company policy and verified findings. At the same time, every employee who demonstrated integrity today will receive formal recognition. Integrity is not measured by how we treat influential people. It is measured by how we treat those we believe have no influence at all." Emily looked down, overwhelmed by the realization that one decision to question an unfair action had mattered. Thomas Walker smiled quietly, knowing that speaking up had been worthwhile. Olivia Bennett ended her recording for the first time all morning, satisfied that the story no longer belonged to social media. It belonged to everyone who had witnessed the truth unfold. Richard ended the call and turned toward Monica. "Ms. Hayes, on behalf of the leadership team, I apologize for what happened today." Monica nodded graciously. "I accept your apology because it came with accountability." Richard asked one final question. "Is there anything else you would like us to do?" Monica looked across the gate one last time before answering. "Yes. Teach every new employee that professionalism begins before assumptions. A boarding pass should never be judged by the person holding it. Verify first. Decide second. Respect always." No one spoke after that because nothing needed to be added. Monica stepped onto the aircraft, and the lead flight attendant welcomed her with genuine warmth. As she settled into her restored first class seat, she looked out the window while the aircraft slowly pushed back from the gate. The same runway that had nearly become another painful memory was now carrying something entirely different. Not victory over individuals, but victory over prejudice. Behind her, Gate C-18 gradually returned to its normal rhythm, yet everyone who had stood there knew it would never feel quite the same again. Emily promised herself she would never stay silent when fairness was at stake. Thomas walked toward his own flight, believing that ordinary voices could still change extraordinary moments. Olivia uploaded one final caption that read, "Today I watched respect become more important than status." Monica closed her eyes for a brief moment as the engines began to climb in power. She thought about the young woman she had once been, standing alone in another airport decades earlier, wondering whether success would ever silence the doubts of strangers. Now she finally knew the answer. Success does not erase prejudice. Character exposes it. Real authority does not shout across a crowded terminal. It remains calm while the truth catches up. And the strongest leaders are never remembered because they demanded respect. They are remembered because they proved that every human being deserves it long before anyone learns their name.